So next, I think we have by far our youngest speaker who's ever spoken at a fair conference. He's going to be 96 next week. So we're happy. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe there have been a couple of younger people here this time, but something like that. We're pleased to have George Mitton. George was raised in Logan, Utah. He received his education at Utah State University, University of Utah, and Columbia University. He assisted for a decade as associate editor of the Farms Review and published there in Dialogue and in BYU Studies Quarterly. Founding member of the Board of Advisors for Interpreter and has published in his journal. And they have 4 children, 20 grandchildren, and 37 great-grandchildren. And gosh, if we had them all here, it'd fill our whole conference hall. I shouldn't, but with that, I'm going to turn the time over to George Mitton.
Good morning. It's good to be here with you. Evidence of Joseph Smith's prophetic calling can be seen in his encounters with counterfeit authority and how he won in ritual contests similar to those experienced by biblical prophets. My published essay on this topic in the Festschrift for Daniel Peterson concerns this type of encounter and is entitled Joseph Smith and the Magical Contest. I will briefly discuss some important aspects of that study. The evil power prepared to oppose restoration of the gospel by setting the stage for ritual, that is, magical contests, to be arrayed against the prophet to discredit him and the work. It will also be seen that as a prophet of God, Joseph beat the adversary at his own game, so to speak. Latter-day Saints have often seen the hand of God in preparing for the latter-day gospel restoration. We should also be aware of things the evil power has done to prepare for his opposition to the restoration. Surely the devil is capable of long-range planning. Joseph was confronted by such things. 2 significant experiences will be considered: his encounter or contest with the ritual of folk magic with its treasure hunting, and the ritual of Freemasonry. In biblical times, prophets had what some scholars refer to as a magical contest. Magic is difficult to define, especially as it relates to religion. I use the term magical because of its use in scholarly literature consulted, but to clarify what I'm trying to examine, it could be termed a ritual contest. Normally, in the type of encounter being considered, ritual or ceremonial procedures are involved, and rich symbolism may be present. These can also include the miraculous or divine intervention, which can be confused with magic. The magician can be the imitation or counterfeit of the prophet, and hence there may be similar features in their lives and ritual, but with differing purposes, sources of power, and intended outcomes. As Christ taught, ye shall know them by their fruits. Counterparts in their lives have caused misunderstanding. Prophets have been falsely accused of using magic or evil power. In ritual contests Joseph Smith had, there was much common purpose and result, as with biblical prophets. This is important evidence of his prophethood and a significant way he was like them. Some magic or ritual encounters in biblical times could involve the following: Moses and Aaron with the magicians of Pharaoh's court, Elijah and Elisha with the prophets of the false god Baal, Abraham and idolatrous priests. The book of Abraham says they placed him on the lion couch for a ritual form of sacrifice. Through prayer and angelic intervention, the prophets were the tables were turned, and the priest died. Also, the Dead Sea Scrolls say that Abraham healed Pharaoh by the ritual laying on of hands after his magicians failed to do so. Joseph of old and Daniel each interpreted dreams of the monarch when magicians failed. Peter and Philip had encounters with sorcerer Simon Magus in the book of Acts. F. Bruce, a noted biblical scholar, observed, quote, Simon Magus plays an extraordinary role in early Christian literature. In the apocryphal Acts of Peter, he is said to have corrupted the Christians in Rome by his false teaching, but to have been worsted at last in a magical contest with Peter. End of quote from Bruce. Since Simon tried to buy priesthood authority, Bruce adds, like the magicians of Egypt in the presence of Moses, Simon recognized that the messenger of the true God had access to a source of power that outstripped his own. And then Christ the Savior requires careful consideration to understand encounters he had, some of supreme importance. There is the temptation by the devil at the beginning of his ministry. Next, Christ's miracles and claims of somewhat similar things done by magicians or sorcerers at the time caused some critics to raise questions of purpose and source of power. Most important, in the crucifixion, there is a great ritual contest won by Christ in the resurrection. In the published essay, I offer my compilation of 15 elements or motives present in contests reviewed from biblical times. I urge others to review these for accuracy and completeness. It is important to consider together the accounts of the contests, to kind of boil them down to see what they have in common. No contest will have all the elements, but each should have a significant representation. The result gives a basis for considering Joseph Smith's contests and to help evaluate them for similarity to those of biblical prophets. While we have not time to discuss them in detail, it is important to note they are contests of authority and spiritual power. There will be miracles. The contests involve the challenge of prophetic authority, claiming new revelation or spiritual power from God, as opposed to an established order, which may derive, at least in part, from a lesser or evil source. Both sides may display power, but the prophet shows a superior source and, in the end, a godly purpose. Now, most importantly, got to remember this as we discuss other things. The prophet may deliberately use some of the oppositional ritual to show he can interpret and employ it with greater power, purpose, and righteousness. I will consider two important confrontations Joseph had in which the prophet's involvement could be anticipated by the adversary over a long period, and his opposition developed, even in a subtle way, to later be an unavoidable part of Joseph's surroundings. Joseph Smith was born and raised in a family that participated in common folk magic of his time. Like the Smiths, many believed that such practices were compatible with Christian belief. It may be thought today that Joseph's experience with them was foolish and nonsensical, but it was not so in his day. Although ridiculed by some, it was a serious matter in the practice and belief of many. This was the peculiar circumstance in which Joseph was affected by a form of magic prevalent at his time and place. Joseph was recognized as an unusually inspired person back to his childhood. Much has been written about manifestations of his gift and seership during his early years, and how he was able to learn over time to use this gift for divine purposes. His gift and use of seer stones and divining rods in his youth are often cited in connection with his attempts to find lost or hidden objects and assist those trying to find buried treasure by ritual and spiritual procedures. An exceptional study of the origins and background of that activity is provided by historian Johannes Dillinger in his book, Magical Treasure Hunting in Europe and North America, A History. He traces development of these ideas and procedures over several centuries. This would afford the adversary opportunity to introduce concepts or practices designed to later oppose and discredit Joseph Smith. Some with whom Joseph had associated caused him serious trouble as they sought to find and obtain the Book of Mormon plates after he received them, claiming they had as much right to them as Joseph. They showed a strong hope and belief that it could be possible to obtain buried treasure by ritual and spiritual means, and thought that Joseph may have done so when he got the plates. Thus they tried to get the plates. Many opposed to Joseph, as he received the Book of Mormon plates, had involvement in the treasure-seeking ritual and were often called money diggers. For the young prophet, his encounters with treasure hunting became a contest between good and evil, and the results of which were better expressed by the results of the ritual, manifesting which side had the greater power and godliness. The Lord had revealed to Joseph that without ritual or ordinances, I'm quoting from D&C 84 here, without ritual or ordinances, the power of godliness is not manifest to men in the flesh. End of quote. Much of the ritual associated with magical treasure hunting had similarity to elements or motifs in biblical contests. In my essay, I provide examples of these rituals. Over time, Joseph received direction from the angel Moroni, who helped him overcome participation in these activities and to use procedures commissioned by God. Martin Harris recalled that, quote, Joseph said the angel told him he must quit the company of the money diggers, that there were wicked men among them. He must have no more to do with them, end of quote. However, some things directed by the angel can be recognized as having counterparts in treasure hunting rituals, but used with divine authority, purpose, and marvelous results. Significantly, and I might say this is probably the most important sentence in my talk, significantly, magical treasure hunting can be seen as a ritualized mockery of the way the Book of Mormon was to come forth from burial, and as a type and symbol of Christ's resurrection. And let me just say parenthetically, I have an essay that an interpreter printed a couple of years back called The Book of Mormon as a Resurrected Book and a Type of Christ, in which I try to show that the book, being a great witness of Christ as it is, also has another witness in that the book itself had followed the pattern of Christ. It originates in heaven, descends to earth. They both, Christ and the book, get their teachings exposed to everyone. They're both rejected of men. They're buried. They come forth in a resurrection. And the word come forth, incidentally, is resurrectional, I think. It's on the title page of the Book of Mormon, and it's in the New Testament also, and much in the Book of Mormon. Come forth, Jesus says to Lazarus when he brings him to life. Lazarus, come forth, he uses that term. That's on the title page of the Book of Mormon. Now, what it amounts to is they both have 11 official witnesses, the book and the Lord, and they both return to heaven with angelic accompaniment with the promise of future return. Now, I mention all this because of this sentence that we'll read again now here. Magical treasure hunting can be seen as a ritualized mockery of the way the Book of Mormon was to come forth from burial and as a type and symbol of Christ's resurrection. When Joseph took the plates from a stone box and the Lord was resurrected from a stone cave of some sort, and they have the brightness that they have, and all, this is the time of the Book of Mormon's resurrection. So we see that the magical treasure hunting was a mockery both of Christ's resurrection and of the Book of Mormon's resurrection in his type. And one of the treasure hunting rituals that you can read about in the late 1700s, this was occurring. And the man who was in charge, who designated a place they would call sacred, where they're going to dig and so forth, he also says, in effect, now we must have 11 people who watch this. Well, that gives the whole game away. The whole thing is a mockery of Christ's resurrection, and it applies also to the Book of Mormon's resurrection, because it's a type of Christ. Going on then. While his now but all forgotten contemporaries were fruitlessly searching for earthly treasures, Joseph eventually won that contest by bringing forth the greater treasures, the heavenly treasures of light and truth in the Book of Mormon. Unlike his opponents, Joseph obtained sacred treasures that have lasting, eternal value. Joseph's transition from using his gift of seership, trying to better his family's impoverished condition, to instead bring forth truth and righteousness for the Lord, was a challenging, difficult, and repenting transition. It can be recognized as a great achievement in his life. It provided unique experience and understanding to help prepare him for his future ministry and establishment of the church. The subject of Freemasonry is vast and complex. The ultimate origins are obscure, and Masonic historians have been as perplexed as anyone in trying to explain them. Francis Yates, the noted English historian of the Renaissance, commented that, quoting her, Freemasonry is one of the most debated and debatable subjects in the whole realm of historical inquiry. That's its origin. The whole realm. All of history. And as to Joseph Smith's encounter, Jeffrey Bradshaw observes, because Joseph Smith became a Mason not long before he began to introduce others to the Nauvoo endowment, some suppose that Masonry must have been the starting point for his inspiration on temple matters. The real story, however, is not so simple. Bradshaw has recently published a detailed book discussing Joseph Smith's temple rites and Freemasonry. There are informative passages in the Pearl of Great Price, which in many respects came as a preparation for temple ordinances soon to be introduced. It appears from these scriptures that ancient prophets had to contend with unauthorized imitations or secret combinations, which in some respects would resemble true rituals, but differed greatly in purpose and were without divine authority. Temple rituals were stolen, misused, and abused. Joseph Smith's encounter with Freemasonry exhibits some similar characteristics to those described about the Egyptians in the book of Abraham. He was required to restore an ancient temple ritual against the backdrop of Freemasonry, a popular and well-established order and ritual to which many Latter-day Saints at Nauvoo belonged when Joseph's revealed temple ceremonies were introduced. He had to establish ordinances that would stand the test of time and be in harmony with information about ancient temples to be discovered in future times. Significant elements in biblical magical contests were present as the temple endowment was revealed alongside Joseph's encounter with Freemasonry. According to the Book of Abraham, the Egyptians were gifted in government or administration, but lacked an authoritative priesthood and divine revelation. Freemasonry was comparable. Remarkable organization and much wisdom and statesmanship had been apparent in this movement. However, in Freemasonry, no directly revealed priesthood, revelation, or religious organization was to be widely established as Joseph Smith was called to do. Masons relied on human philosophy and tradition, along with biblical influences and things of unknown origin. The Book of Abraham helps us understand the relationship Joseph had to Freemasonry. He was required to introduce revealed priesthood ceremonies when the other ritual was already well established in the world. Joseph Smith succeeded well. He explained that Freemasonry had an apostate form of ancient temple ritual, just as sectarian churches had incomplete and changed forms of other doctrines and teachings. It appears that virtually all of the Latter-day Saints then found in Joseph's ritual something superior. They followed him and considered his ritual of profound significance, intensely Christian, and having important relationships to many aspects of the gospel. They had spiritual witnesses of its truth and efficacy, and even into the eternities. Freemasonry did not provide such rich religious relationships. Indeed, it did not claim to be a religion at all. And while some Masonic-type symbols appear in both rituals, it is most important to note that the endowment gives a different meaning or purpose to the symbols. In the Latter-day Saint ceremonies, they are introduced as part of an authorized covenant relationship with God, not available through Freemasonry. The basic differences of purpose are far more impressive than the similarities. This is most significant because in ritual, the meaning of the symbol is all important. If a different meaning is understood, it is not really the same ritual. There is a large literature attempting to show the origins of Freemasonry. From this, it is evident it developed from many sources. A frequent claim is that it goes back to the Temple of Solomon. This is not traceable. The biblical allusions can be compared, but not legendary claims. Some have thought Masonic ideas were brought back from the Holy Land by Crusaders. Alchemy is also a claimed source, as is the ceremonial magic tradition and the secretive Rosicrucian Society. Any of these or other such sources could have conveyed scattered fragments of true ordinances from the ancient past, but they would not have the accuracy, completeness, purpose, or authority restored to Joseph by direct revelation from God. As in the development of magical treasure hunting, the long and complex development of Freemasonry should be seen as providing the adversary with much opportunity to introduce some concepts or procedures which could be used later to oppose and discredit Joseph Smith. As a consequence, it has been asserted by critics that he was a plagiarist of ritual and did not receive it by revelation but from the Masons. However, the favorable reaction of Latter-day Saints who are familiar with detail of both the Masonic ritual and Joseph's when it was introduced is an important witness of his prophetic gifts and power. If any might be disturbed by the superficial similarities, it would be those at the time who were well acquainted with both rituals. Joseph Smith clearly won that ritual contest. From our perspective today, Joseph's temple ceremonies have proven to be most durable and meaningful to more and more people as events unfold. It is not my purpose to criticize the Masons, for they do much good. However, it should be obvious to Latter-day Saints that Joseph Smith established a marvelous revealed order with lasting and eternal significance, a covenant order that brings about much selfless service, many remarkable spiritual experiences, and much long-term satisfaction. Now the crucifixion as the primary ritual contest. The most enduring and important ritual contest of all time was one in the crucifixion, resurrection, and eternal redemption provided by the Savior Jesus Christ. Virtually all of the elements or motifs common in the contests being considered are represented in the atoning sacrifice of Christ, such as ritual, courts, intense symbolism, miracles, challenge to authority, godly purpose, mockery, sacrifice, death and resurrection, angelic assistance, etc., etc. The Savior voluntarily submitted. Remember, we talked about that earlier, that the prophet might undertake some of the symbols of his opposition to show he can use them with greater power and authority. The Savior did that very thing when he voluntarily submitted to a barbaric Roman execution ritual. It brought great agony and the mockery and scorn of his judgeship and his kingship. This so he could descend below all things, and as he said, be lifted up upon the cross, that I might draw all men unto me, that as I have been lifted up by men, even so should men be lifted up, to stand before me, to be judged of their works. That's 3 Nephi 27. Thus, each of us is a participant in the primary ritual contest. Do we acknowledge and look to the Savior as the one who beat them at their own game in the crucifixion by overcoming the world to emerge from this contest resurrected with all power given to him in heaven and earth? Or do we side with those who fall away and crucify him afresh? This is an ongoing contest as we each learn to judge, discern, and make choices between the two powers. Thank you.